Hexacon even actually announced some pretty significant news around Apple's bug bounty program. And the big one is a $2 million payout for exploit chains comparable to these mercenary spyware attacks, some of the, zero click, one click things. $2 million, not for vulnerabilities, but for full exploit chains.
Right.
Does this move the needle? Does this move the needle and keep it out of the hands of someone wanting to sell it to a Paragon, an NSO? Like, that's the battle, right? The battle here now is like, how are we pricing this thing to entice folks to give it to Apple instead?
I mean, how comparable is that to the current pricing, right? Like, to me, in my outdated ignorance, it sounds like the numbers we were hearing about the black market sort of paying for an exploit chain, and they too would be paying for an exploit chain. They, NSO, I'm sure, doesn't mind collecting pieces of vulnerabilities, but they need chains. So it sounds like we're in the ballpark, I guess. And
yeah, but what does this move the price? That's my fear here, is that Apple gets into the ballpark and then the ballpark moves.
Well, but that's good, right? Like, think about it, right? Like, at the end of the day, if the whole point of this is that you're just trying to increase the cost and the scarcity of these things, then if Apple pays 2 and that means goal. NSO has to pay 5, then, and then Apple pays 3 and then NSO needs to pay 8, right? Like, that's the whole point, right? Like, that's the whole point of this whole situation. You're not going to stop the vulns from coming around. The weird machines are going to be weird, but talking about, like, think about it from the perspective of a Paragon that has to, like, keep operations going, right? You're effectively saying, okay, this thing that our entire business relies on to function day to day for our most basic operations, right? Those exploits are not for the every once in a while thing, right? Like, that is a part of their day-to-day product offering, especially with no persistence in it, right? Like, the whole point being, we're not setting any persistence so that we don't get caught. Anytime somebody restarts the phone, you need to reinfect it, which means you need this exploit chain to still be valid. Now, you're telling me that exploit chain costs at least $2 million. Every time we use it, you've got this, like, you got to kind of gird your loins and go, ooh, okay, yeah, we're there, we're good. You didn't get caught. And then
they're still in business, though. They're still in business, probably profitable business. So let's not pretend that it's affecting them in any significant. Well, it's affecting them, but
it is. So I think where you would see it affecting them is not whether they're in business or not, or whether they're getting contracts or not. But if you see situations like if you remember after the hacking team leak, if we would go through the hacking team emails, you would see moments when they would be like, we're putting a stop to all operations. We need to go fix this shit. Like, basically like a no service period. Because what you're saying is, right now, like, we're unsafe. We don't know that we can essentially do this without getting caught or without somehow making the situation worse. We need to go replace a component, or we need to go, rejigger the platform, or rejigger our persistence mechanism, whatever, so that we don't get caught. With this exploit situation, it's much more interesting because you're not talking about rejiggering the malware, the implants themselves, because there's, as far as we know, no, like, meaningful detection capability on iOS itself. But you are saying that you can't actually guarantee that any of this stuff will get on box unless we find another exploit chain. And in that, like, I don't like Apple's approach, but I respect it for its consistency and for its, like, pragmatic approach, in that it actually has some kind of a strategy. The idea being, like, we're neglecting the implant side of it. And I'm sure Apple people will say, no, we're not. We're doing X, Y, and Z. I'm like, no, you're fucking neglecting the implant side of it. I don't give a shit what you say. But you are boxing people into saying, like, in order to get on here, you've got, like, only a couple of mechanisms. And the one that most of you are relying on is based on these exploit chains. We're going to make this shit as expensive as possible, and then we're going to burn them as often as we can. It is a viable mechanism.
Look, I think
sorry,
at the
Juan,
moment...
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought there was a lag, and I thought you would go.
No, I wanted to say that if you ask me, it makes no sense to sell to Apple. Like, at the moment, I know it sounds brutal, but it makes zero sense if you're driven by a financial point of view Makes no sense to sell to Apple.
And there's a
Because you
subset of
can-
folks that's just their primary motivation. I'll get as much money
Sure,
as
they
I
wanna
can
make
for
money.
these findings. Right.
So I think the only way we can make this work, and I know it will make some people upset and it'll make me not okay in their books, but I think that we need to extend the sanctions against the companies like NSO and whoever to the people selling them 0 days. Only then
Oh.
it will
That's a take.
become
Yeah.
logical to sell to Apple, so you avoid the risk of getting sanctioned for fueling and supporting these abuses and these abusive businesses. Otherwise, in the current state of things, it makes no sense to sell to Apple for less money because again, there's a bunch of companies buying 0 days. If you remember, $10 million. Some companies out of United Arab Emirates. Some Russian companies were hyping $20 million for the full zero-click chain with persistence. And that's still like, I don't know, 10 times more money than what Apple offers. So unless we find a way to make it risky and dangerous to sell to NSO and the likes, it makes no
problem with
sense to
that,
sell
But
to
that's where
Apple.
you end up in like Intellexa territory, right? Like you sell to those people and it doesn't go super well. You can't even pretend to just be selling to like a reputable country along the way. But like, I think I take your point, Costin, about it having to be kind of more risque. I think honestly, I would put it a little differently. That's like a profit maximization function. What I would say is if Apple chooses to be reliable as a buyer, they will have a much greater impact than if they just try to be the highest bidder. Which is to say, in the past, we've seen instances where people were like, yeah, I reported the thing, and then they like jerked me around for 6 months and then decided they weren't going to pay me and they patched it. And like
Those are
when
the
that
only
shit
stories I hear, though. I've
Yeah.
never heard of someone saying they've gotten 500,000 from Apple for a bug or an exploit bounty. I noticed in the Wired piece that accompanied this announcement from Yvonne, he was quoted as saying, "Oh, we've done a few $500,000 payments in the past." I've never seen anyone document it publicly.
I mean,
the
I'm
only
sure that's also
documentation I
with an
get is
NDA, right?
the only documentation I see publicly is when they dick around folks. So I
Right.
feel like there's a misbalance there. Before you finish up your point, Juanito, I wanted to, under Costin's proposal to sanction even sellers, doesn't that just reshape the market entirely? Prices come dropping down, and then again, I don't understand how that fixes the.
You need to be careful. You need to be careful. So look, in my view, I think we tend to focus too much on the money. It makes it sound like it's like this, casino
money's the
payout
headline,
type
though.
situation.
The money is the headline.
But that's my point. I think that's the fact that it's the headline is focusing way too much on the money when what you are ignoring is the fact that like these people are working their asses off. These exploits are not easy. Like I have immense respect for people who can come up with like an iOS exploit chain. And what I hear from people who know how this shit actually works is that now it's the kind of work that takes teams. It's not just a single savant out there who's just popping out an iOS exploit chain. And one of the smartest people I know, like I know it almost killed her to like develop one of these things on her own over months and months and months. And like when you look at that situation, the reliability of being able to monetize your effort, I think is a much more important factor than how much you make for it. And that's something that Apple could
Lean in into, right?
If they're smart and they lower their guard and they go, yeah, maybe we already had this exploit chain or like the relevant vulns in the back, but we should just pay these guys their fucking money for the sake of the program for this and not hide it under an NDA, but instead say, hey, congratulations to these 3 fucking geniuses. We just like paid them out $2 million for, whatever. And we've patched stuff in the next, we will be patching stuff, or we patched stuff 6 months ago, whatever the fuck you want to do. But the point is, it's a dark market. It's a gray market, which includes a certain amount of unreliability and a lot of like game theoretical concerns about whether like, are we investing too much time into a thing that won't pay off? Are we going to tell somebody about the thing and then they won't pay us? Are we going to get screwed over by the broker who's in the middle of it?
That's the reality of that business, right?
Exactly.
That world, yeah.
And Apple can change the reality of that business if they just become known as look, if you showed up with a chain, you're going to make some fucking money. period. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not 10 mil, maybe it's 2, maybe it's not 2 but it's 1.5, maybe if it's a duplicate we'll dock like 400,000 but you still get 1.6 million. All of a sudden you are working towards a reliable payout. And a reliable payout is much more valuable in a lot of ways for people who are doing this day in and day out than going to like the broker and the thing and the maybe of the money, maybe 10 mil. Like I'll take 2 mil for sure over 10 mil maybe on something that could be burned in the next, Citizen Lab release. It means something.
The
Yeah,
thing is,
but
there will
again, there's no
always be.
retribution and there's no risk. So it doesn't
But
matter
there's
if it's burned by the next Citizen Lab. If you personally are not affected and you don't get named and shamed, I think it's fine. Moreover, you
well,
can get paid in crypto and you don't have to pay taxes, which I think is also can be a problem if you live in
Well,
some
but you're
countries,
not.
right?
But Kosin, in many of these, my understanding is in many of these cases, they're not getting paid. Like it's not like you just show up and they give you like a briefcase full of money and you shake hands and you walk away, right? Like in many cases, what happens, as I understand it, is you get, let's say, maybe you'll get half up front or a third up front, and then you get paid a certain percentage or a certain amount for every month that the exploit is still valid, and then the minute it gets burned you're done, right? And it's like it's also a way of controlling that this person doesn't take the money. Oh, I take 10 mil from
then
you
go
and then I
patch
turn
it.
around
Yeah.
and I sell it to Apple, right?
Burn it.
Like, so in many ways that gray market has developed its mechanisms to keep itself sort of healthy or honest, and that entails a certain amount of like hedging and fear and uncertainty. And I think that's my main point is I'm glad Apple is talking numbers that are starting to sound like they're closer to the ballpark of the gray market. I think the main mechanism that they can lean into, that they should lean into, that would make them the de facto person to go sell this shit to, is to be reliable and to lean into paying people instead of looking for a reason not to pay them, which is the experience that a lot of folks have with bug bounties, where you go, dude, like especially with this, right? Like the effort that we're talking about, if it takes months, if it takes a bunch of people, then we're not talking about like $2 million for a single individual is a lot of money. $2 million for the work of like 6 specialized people over 3 months is not a ton of money, especially when you don't know if you're going to get paid at all. And like I think that's the part that like Rewards for Justice never figured out. That's why it looks like a fucking scam. But with the bug bounty platforms, with being the richest, one of the richest, if not the richest, cash richest company on earth, just lean into paying these people to develop the relationships. Lean in, even if it's dev null, even if you go, oh, we already knew about this one, just pay their fucking money for the sake of establishing the reputation that goes, dude, why would you put yourself in bed with the Saudis? Just go to Apple and like Ivan will write you a check. That's a way to actually disrupt this.
Yeah, but we need to.
We discussed in the demand for these commercial spyware platforms isn't going away anyway. I just can't help but think this just keeps pushing the prices up because like the demand for zero-click chain, one-click chain, like these things are super, super valuable. Even if Apple shifts the prices from 1 million to 2 million for zero-click chains, remote attack with no user interaction, from 1 million to 2 million. Then the one-click ones, which is a remote attack with one-click user action from K up to $1 million. Like we're now helping to push the prices for those things on the gray market, on the black market even higher.
Which is great.
It's the goal. I mean, Costin, you've always talked about imposing cost and making sure we're raising the bar so high that only a few people are capable of doing this. Is this like a win in your book?
I think it'll be very difficult to keep the bar high from a technical point of view because you need to innovate. So as soon as Apple, introduces some new features, innovation, iOS 26, things like that, there'll be new bugs. They'll introduce new attack surfaces, and then it'll be very difficult to keep these numbers up. And just imagine, I remember the story from a few years ago when was it Zerodium that was actually saying that we have so many zero-click chains that we don't need.
We don't want anymore. Yeah.
We don't buy them anymore. So like these numbers, that Apple is mentioning here, you can't sustain them like for an unlimited amount of time, in the sense that if, let's say, a dozen people just walk in with their 0 days and they're all unique and different from each other, I very much doubt that they will be able to pay every single
Still a
one
drop
of
in the
them.
bucket for Apple in the grand scheme of things.
True, but like, what is the total budget of this program? Because we know how these things work. They get a budget of, let's say, $20 million for 5 years, and then they need to pay like for the best bugs with that limited budget. It's not unlimited. So at the same
it
time,
could be.
I think it's very important that this program, whatever it works, it has like the carrot and the stick. So if it's just the carrot and paying, like, it will not be enough to shift the tides. You need the stick as well. So maybe they need to work with the Trump administration or whoever to make it more risky to sell 0 days to sanctioned companies or mercenary companies that are known to have been involved in abuses. So only when you have both of them, I think you will make a change.